Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Hockey Debates podcast. I'm Bob Duff. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Hall of Fame writer Kevin Allen. And today, our special guest, you know him from the Hockey News and from the Hockey News podcast. It's Ken Campbell, the senior writer for the Hockey News. And welcome aboard, Ken. I see we both could get roles in Civil War reenactments based on our hairstyles right now.
I'm not even sure they'd take me. My hair is completely out of control at the moment, but
hey, at least I got an appointment, but it's not until August. Because we just opened up. That's the earliest I could get in.
My wife keeps saying she's gonna do it, and we keep putting it off. So I'll have to get this mangy thing taken care of at some point.
They opened up part of Ontario this week, starting tomorrow, but neither Ken or I were on the lucky sections that opened, I believe. So we're both kind of, unless I want to drive to Chatham and get a haircut. You know, been cooped up so long, that might make a nice day trip.
Well, there is in the U.S. there's been a lot of discussion about how everyone just seems to be over the COVID-19 seclusion, and everybody's acting as if it's over. And then today it was announced that we could have 200,000 deaths by September, and the stock market is the last time it was looked was down 1,800 points. So all the investors think this isn't over.
I don't think it is. I think it's. I wouldn't be surprised if we're not even halfway through right now. So it can look dire at times.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Kevin and I have talked about this, Ken, but as much as there seems to be consternation amongst hockey people about Justin Trudeau's proclamation that NHLers would have to quarantine for 14 days if they wanted to use a Canadian city as a hub city, when you look at what's going on in the U.S. between COVID and between the protesting, you got to think Canadian cities are looking better and better to the NHL right now.
Well, yeah, but I still think that's going to be a pretty big sticking point for them. I get the sense that they're trying to work this out somehow. That they're talking to the government, and there's been some constant dialogue there. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe those get relaxed a little bit by the time everything's said and done. Yeah, it's gonna be a tough sell, I would think, for a sports league to be able to say, yeah, well, we know you're treating everybody else like this, but treat us a little bit different. So I still think that the two hub cities will be in the U.S. I'm from everything I'm hearing, Las Vegas is a lock, and the other city that I think in the East has probably is the front runner is Columbus. Because of the fact that they can, that the hotels would be a problem there, but the number of facilities that they can use to house teams and to have practice rinks and that sort of thing would probably work in their favor. So I think those are going to be the two front runners. I mean, we've heard about Edmonton, Vancouver, Toronto, and Canada, but I still think it's pretty problematic, and I would suspect that they'll be in the U.S.
Ken, the NBA and NHL seem to be on a parallel course in terms of roughly when we're going to start playing. Yeah. And I noted this morning that as many as 60 NBA players were on a call about whether they even wanted to play this season or not. There's a lot of concern. I know there's a few NHL players that I'm aware of that have some concerns about whether we should play or not. But do you have a sense that there's a lot of that? And do you expect, other than the people we know with conditions that put them in a higher risk group, do you anticipate we'll have a few players that are just going to say, look, because of my circumstances, I'm just not going to do it?
There might be a few. I do not expect it to be a huge groundswell. I think the players I'm not sure about the NBA, but I do know the one thing that has kind of set the NHL apart is that the players and the league have been working pretty much in lockstep right from the word go here. They've been on the same page, and from the people I've talked to, they're asking the right questions, they're talking to the right people, and they're listening to the right people. So I don't suspect that there's going to be a groundswell. I would think that if you're a player who is in that group that might be compromised, or you live with someone that might be compromised, that might be a thing. But I suspect that the vast majority of players will play. I mean, you guys have seen it before a million times, right? Like, these guys will play through anything and everything. They'll lie to their trainers, to say they're healthy to play when they're not. I mean, and to their peril sometimes. And I don't suspect that this will be any exception. I'm not advocating for that, but I am saying that that's kind of the reality as far as I can see.
And then along those lines, you wonder if a guy is starting to feel under the weather and it happens to be a day where they're not testing them because they're not going to test them every day, is he going to go to his medical people and say, I think there's a chance I might have COVID, or is he just going to keep quiet and suck it up and play on through and risk everybody's health?
Well, actually, Bob, from what I understand, the NHL is going to, at least once they get to the hub city part of it, they are going to be testing players every day. Gary Bettman said that in the return to play plan, that that they will test every day, and they expect that the results of the tests will be available the next morning. I can't remember what exact numbers he said, but they expect to spend millions of dollars on testing, and they're going to do upwards of 25,000 tests. So I do think that I'm not sure about, the training camp part of it, whether or not the individual teams will be testing. I would assume they will be, but I do know once they get to the actual tournament part of it, where they've got the 12 teams sequestered and quarantined, that they will be testing from what I understand, they will be testing every player and every team personnel every single day.
Yeah, Kenny, you and I have probably a combined 60 years of covering the NHL or more. And, you and I know that, hockey players like to enjoy.
Uh-oh. There he is.
You lost me again. But
Yeah,
how confident are you that players are going to maintain the sequestering and they're not going to sneak out or, to see a friend or when a brother comes to town? Do you think we're going to take this extremely seriously and keep this, keep the bubble intact?
I do, because I think, I think they realize what's at stake. I think they realize they're there for one purpose, and that's to play hockey. And I think what we have to remember too is that, yes, at the beginning there is going to be 12 teams in each hub city, but after a week, that's going to go down to 8, and after a couple more weeks, it's going to go down to 4. Like, it's not going to be this sort of critical mass of guys who are there for 2 months. There's going to be 2 teams that end up being there for 2 months, and they're the ones that this is really going to be a challenge for. The top sort of 4 teams in the league, they're going to be there for a while. But I think that players are smart enough to know that, what's at stake. I think they care enough about their health and their careers that they will, they'll toe the line on this one. I think, at least in Canada, I know that in most provinces and in almost everywhere in Canada, people generally have taken this very seriously, and they've sort of toed the line with what the health experts have been telling us through the government, and people have stayed home and done a pretty good job with that. And I suspect that players will do the same.
Well, isn't taking them to Vegas, though, isn't that kind of just taunting them to say, yeah, you can come to Sin City, but you got to stay in? It's kind of like taking them to the strip club and telling them they can eat the buffet, but they can't see the girls.
It is. It would be a bit of a challenge for that. And I mean, from what I understand, Vegas is open now. So, I saw a picture inside a casino the other day where there were all kinds of people around and nobody was wearing masks. And I know that Vegas has been very eager to open up and that. So, yeah, that would be a tough one, but I suspect that they will. I think today's player is pretty good at putting those things in perspective, and is actually pretty good at sort of knowing what's at stake. I think the days of guys, going out and carousing the night before a big game, you don't see that very often anymore. I don't think. I don't think there's a lot of it. There are some isolated cases, I suppose, but for the most part, I think these guys know what's at stake, what they've got to do to stay healthy and to stay competitive. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be. I'm pretty sure they're going to be fine.
Ken, when all this resuming play talk began, there was no discussion whatsoever of playing with fans. And now all of a sudden in the last week or so, I've started to hear, not from anyone that really matters, but just in terms of general chatter, that, what if we could get to the final and start figuring out a way to get some fans in there? Have you heard anything like that? And do you think that's even remotely realistic?
I have not, and I don't. I don't assume that there are going to be any fans in any buildings in any sport until there's a vaccine. And the earliest that is coming is early 2021. There's one out of Oxford right now at Oxford University that I believe is in phase 3 of trials, which is the final phase, and it's shown some promise. And if they can hit on that one, that maybe if they rush it, there will be, there's a possibility it could be early 2021. From what I understand, people are working on 130 different groups are working on a vaccine right now. And most of those are really in the infancy stages. So, I don't see a way of getting, certainly not big crowds in buildings, maybe small crowds, but I don't see people gathering en masse until for quite a while yet.
Yeah, maybe they can put the Florida Panthers in charge of teaching other cities how to social distance your fans, because they're pretty good. Do we know who's going to do the testing? Has that been discussed? Like, is it the teams going to be in charge of their own testing? Or are they going to have an independent group doing it? Because you wonder, like, say you're the Edmonton Oilers and you're getting ready for Game 7 of the final and Connor McDavid tests positive. Are you going to really want to tell the league that, Connor can't play tonight?
Yeah, no, this is going to be a league. Like, once they get to the hub cities and it's a 12, it's the league is running everything. The teams won't be doing any of that stuff. And from what the people at the NHL have said, that it's going to be an outside. They're going to contract out that testing, so it won't be. There won't be any sort of conflicts of interest, I guess, if you will. So, I believe that's going to be handled by somebody that's contracted out by the NHL, and they're the ones that will be administering all the tests. So I would hope that's not going to be a problem.
Ken, this is going to be a very unique situation. We obviously in NHL history have never seen anything like this before. And of course, I ask everyone to speculate on what the hockey will look like. And there's some things that people tend to agree on, but everyone's all over the map. So I'm going to give you your shot. What's hockey going to look like when we get into this? Obviously, we've never had a play-in before. Players haven't been conditioning. What's it going to be like?
I think it's going to be great. I think the level of hockey is going to be very, very good. I don't think that it's going to take as long for guys to get up to speed and to get their timing back as a lot of other people do. I mean, a lot of them are working out. They've been working out through the pandemic, off ice, of course. Now with phase 2 in effect, guys have hit the ice. So we've, and we just found out today that training camps are officially going to open July 10th. So between now and July 10th, they will have skated a good number of times. You're going to have a couple of weeks training camp to tune up sort of exhibition games. I think by the time this starts, they're going to be fine. They're going to be, they're going to be just fine. They're going to be, their timing will be back, everything. And the best thing about it now is that, you've got teams that are probably very, very close to being 100% healthy, all rested. I mean, if you're going to prepare for a 2-month marathon, this is probably the best preparation you can have, or the best situation you can have in that respect. Totally healthy, totally rested. You just haven't, you haven't had to, go down the stretch winning a bunch of games and just to get in. And I think it's going to be very, very good hockey. I think it's going to be really fast. I think the players are going to be in really good shape still. Guys don't lose that. They're not going to lose that. Like I said, today's athlete, I think, is a lot different. I think a lot of these guys have some kind of home gym that they've been using for the past couple of months. And, with the opportunities they're going to have to skate and to play before then, I think they're going to be just fine. So I'm actually looking forward to it. I think the hockey's going to be terrific.
I agree.
One thing we both agree on, Ken, I read your piece last week, is that whoever wins this cup, the people who say there should be an asterisk behind it, I think we had Nick Kotsanika from the NHL.com on last week, and he said there should be an exclamation point. And I think that's probably right, especially if the champion comes from outside that top 8 seeding. They're going to have to win 19 games to win the Stanley Cup, which no one's ever had to do.
Exactly. I also said there should be an asterisk, because the asterisk should be for, to denote the team that had to overcome more obstacles than any other team in history. I don't like, to me, I mean, I guess everybody's entitled to their opinion, and if they don't like it, they don't like it, and that's fine. But my goodness, we're getting hockey back.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Isn't that good enough? Like, do we really have to complain about the format? I mean, is it perfect? No, of course it's not perfect, but none of this was going to ever be perfect. I mean, the Los Angeles Kings lost more games than they won when they won the Stanley Cup in 2012. I mean, we've seen situations 2 years ago. The St. Louis Blues and the Winnipeg Jets and Nashville Predators met in the second round, and they were the number 1 and 2 teams in the NHL. Is that perfect? I don't think so. Like, we wouldn't put an asterisk beside the 1936 Montreal Maroons, who only played 48 games in 2 playoff series, right? Like, I think you play the format that you're presented with. I think the best team is going to win this year still. And if it happens to be one of those teams that comes up from the 4 spots that shouldn't have or wouldn't have otherwise made the playoffs, then that's to be applauded. Like you said, to win 19 games in the stretch of a couple of months is you do that, and you deserve it. You're worthy. So I'm with both of you guys. I'm not. I don't think there's any asterisks that need to be pulled out of the case here. I think it's. I think whoever wins this thing, whether it's the Boston Bruins, who have won the President's Trophy, or the Arizona Coyotes, who are getting in by the skin of their teeth, I don't think anybody has to make any excuses or any apologies for carrying that Stanley Cup around at the end of all of this.
All right, Ken. Well, we appreciate you joining us today and offering us your insight. You can obviously share Ken's insight anytime you want at the Hockey News and thehockeynews.com. You can catch him on the Hockey News podcast, and we thank you for joining us today, Ken.
My pleasure. It's always fun to talk to a couple of legends.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, you have yourself a great day, Ken.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
All right, bye.
Ken said what a treat it is just to have hockey back. But I got to say, too, it's always a treat to have Ken Campbell on a podcast. There are a lot of terrific writers covering the game of hockey. But I always find Ken has a very unique, he's very opinionated, but it's always very laced with insight. He's covered the game a long time. He knows what works, and he's not one of those guys that is cantankerous just to be cantankerous. We see those people from time to time. And his take on the fact that we should just be happy no matter, because there was never going to be a perfect format, because there's never a perfect format, even when we play in the regulation way, is just right on the mark. And I think it is going to be exciting hockey. And And I think the mystery of it all just makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from a betting standpoint, if there was ever a year to take a flyer on a long shot to win the cup, this is it, because everybody's coming in cold, and whatever team gets hot first is going to be the one that has the best chance to win it all.
Yeah, interesting that Ken doesn't think there's going to be any conditioning issues. As a general rule, I would agree with that, but I do think not everybody, particularly the younger players, had places, to work out. So these guys keep themselves in good shape all year round. So I mean, nobody's going to be badly out of shape, but I think that we might have a little bit of timing issues when we first start out. But I guess as we move along, we should be fine. I read that in the agreement that was reached July 10th that we're going to have, even though they're not putting any time on it because we don't know when we're going to start. But there's been speculation on social media that it will be 2 weeks training camp in your home city, and then another 6 days of a pseudo training camp in the hub city. 20 days, would that be enough in your mind?
It should be. I mean, that's probably about what they get today when they have a normal training camp in the fall. The thing they're not going to get is the bunch of exhibition games that they get during a regular training camp. But I agree with you on the conditioning thing, because I was someone who played the game not at a high level, but certainly I played in some little bit of junior, and I came up through the ranks in all the sports. Whatever sport you played, no matter how hard you worked out in preparation for training camp was still hell. I think there's a reason why even elite NHL athletes hired personal trainers to put them through grueling physical workouts, because someone else is always going to push you harder in the most instances than you'll push yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point to be sure. But you were talking about betting before. Team maybe you could take a flyer on. But I'm betting you've got a couple of teams that you would put on your list of teams that might be a good value bet. That are probably long shots on the odds, but might have a better chance than that.
Well, the team we've talked about in previous podcasts that I really like is Columbus. I just think, they've got two capable quality goaltenders. They've probably got the best defense pairing in the NHL in Werenski and Jones. And all those injuries they had have healed. They're going to have a healthy Cam Atkinson. I think they're a team that I'd be scared to play.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing, like, nobody talks about them because of their defense, but if the offense is ahead of the defense, if it's going to take some time for like the Bruins defense to get to where it would be at normally if this regular season was ending, I think Frederik Andersen is the type of goalie that if he gets hot, we've all seen goalies, steal series and get hot for the entire postseason. And that just, gives teams such an edge. I mean, what about the Maple Leafs as a long shot? Now, I know there are people going, oh, come on, they don't have any defense. But, I've seen teams that the Devils team got to the finals not so long ago to play the Kings. And the next year, you couldn't even remember who was on their defense. They didn't have that named defense, and yet they got all the way there. So, I think this is so wide open that even a team like the Maple Leafs, if their defense just could play well for a 6-week period, and Anderson got hot, we know their offense is going to carry the day.
Well, the interesting thing about that is one of the criticisms the Leafs have faced when they've gone out in the first round these last few years is that they overplayed Anderson during the regular season and he just ran out of gas. Now, this is the year where he's certainly going to be rested going into the playoffs. So we may answer that question finally. Is it because Freddie was running out of gas, or is it because Freddie just isn't a playoff goalie? So we may get that answer this spring, summer, whenever we start.
I wonder if it'll be a mixed bag too with regard to the goalkeepers about who's sharp and who's not, because they could certainly work out and such, but there's nothing that prepares goalies quite like a game workload. They need to see shots, and they clearly weren't seeing any shots during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's going to be interesting to see like who's hot and who's not. Like that's going to play a big role in how this is all going to play out.
And one of the things I can speak to as a former goalie is even when you've been out for a while or you haven't played, practice isn't the same. You can take all the shots you want in practice, but it's a controlled environment. You can't replicate a game in practice. And a lot of goalies, come back from a long-term injury and struggle at first because of that. Now, here's an interesting dilemma if you're an NHL coach. If you're in one of those best-of-5 series and your number one guy is shaky, how quickly do you move to the other guy? Do you count on him getting it back in time? Because you don't have a whole lot of room for error in a best-of-5 series. Yeah,
I wonder if we might see some backups just kind of steeled in that just because it's such a unique situation where I think the normal feeling for a coach might be different. Like in other words, you don't worry about this is probably a poor example because I don't see them pulling Carey Price no matter what. But suppose Carey Price didn't look good for a couple of games, and now the coach is going to be faced with, maybe he just wasn't able to go 3 months without playing and coming back said, should I switch goalies here where he normally would think of that. Now, as I said, that's a bad example because I don't think they'd do that. But, like, for example, Nashville, might look at that. The Penguins with a couple of goalie options could move, quickly. Boston, if Tuukka Rask didn't look sharp, would they go to a lot quicker than they normally would? All of those type situations. Differently.
Yeah, when you talk about the teams that are in the best-of-5, you lose game 1, you got to win game 2 because you don't want to have to win 3 in a row to survive. So, if your goalie stinks it out in game 1, then you got a real tough call going into game 2. Do you just say it was an off night and count on him and believe in him, or do you go to the other guy?
Yeah, I always said that, in 7-game series, like game 4 is always the most important game, in my opinion, because it's usually the difference between 3-1 and 2-2. So, game 4 to me tells you what kind of series you've got going. And in this best-of-5, it's game 2, because like if you win game 2 after you lost, well, okay, now it's just a best-of-3, and we'll flip a coin. But if you, like you said, if you lose, you're down 2-0, and you got to sweep. You got to win 3 in a row, And so now that's the game 2 is the most important game. It's and that's what they're going to talk about how big is that game 2. It's going to be big. There's no doubt about it. And the 7-game series gives you a little bit of breathing room. Like you can lose the first game and say to yourself, "Hey, look, it's still going to be a long series." You can't say that when you lose game 1 of a 5-game series. You can say, "Boy, we lost that game. We could be in real trouble here." Is probably what you're going to be thinking.
Yeah, we're gonna see a lot of coaches become Mike Keenan in the playoffs when it comes to handling goalies because he was never afraid to hook a guy, even if it was he pulled Ed Belfour in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final for Dominik Hasek, who then nobody knew who the heck Dominik Hasek was in 1992. So you never know what could happen, and like you say, it could almost be like pitching in baseball. You've got an ace starter, but if he doesn't have it that day, you get him out of there, and you can't afford to, like you say. If you start the guy in game 1, he doesn't play well, and then you get into game 2 and you fall behind, you have to pull the hook quick and get the other guy in there.
Yeah, shake up the team a little bit.
Yeah, you're really going to have to, I think, coach a lot differently than you would in a normal circumstance.
Well, I wonder if that's harder for the modern coach to do. Like, It seemed to me when I first started covering the league, coaching was more instinctual than it is today. Like today, it almost seems, and now this is an oversimplification, and I'm generalizing here, and not all 31 coaches act like this way, but and in general, I noticed that, it's less of a gut feel and more on what they would normally do under those circumstances. Like they have it in mind when I pull my goalie. It's like in their head. It's like if we're down by 2, on the road, like that's the way it feels to me, as opposed to just looking at the guy and says, he doesn't have it tonight. I'm going with a different guy. Now I could be wrong on that, but that's how it feels. Like they have rules for everything now. Like how many seconds can be left in a game when you can pull your goalie so they can't shoot the puck down in your empty net. They look at everything now, and how much time you need to score a goal off a face-off. So it just feels like that way even for, in the NFL, they have, rules for when you go for 2, throughout the whole game. They got a card that says how you do that. Well, I don't think that NHL coaches have cards to tell them when to pull the goalie, but I think all of them, it's less about circumstances right then and more about what they've learned about pulling their goalie as a coach, and they utilize all that to make that decision, as opposed to just sort of have a gut feel. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I used to like the way Glenn Sather did it in Edmonton and New York when he was coaching. He would play all 4 of his lines in the first period, and then he would cut back to where he would use 3, and whatever. It wasn't always the line that was viewed as the 4th line that stayed the 4th line. He'd go with the 3 that were, in his opinion, that had it going that night, that were on their game, and whatever line he felt wasn't playing up to snuff, he'd cut back their ice time significantly over the last 2 periods. And I always thought that was a good formula to follow because, I think you have to rely on your gut sometimes, and everybody has off nights. If teams and players didn't have off nights, we'd never see upsets. The better team would win every game.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it is that time of day already, Kevin. We've run out of time. That was a quick one today. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Ken Campbell and our insights. We hopefully entertained you and informed you a little bit. We'll be back at it again on Monday. This has been the Hockey Debates Podcast. I'm Bob Duff. He's Kevin Allen, and we'll see you on Monday. Thanks for joining us.